ever wondered what happened around the world during the 20th century? During this time, a lot of important events like World War I, World War II, and Cold War took place. Come with us to discover what happened in each and every one of these events that changed the world.
The first event of the 20th century that we're going to talk about happened in Latin America, more specifically in Mexico. The Mexican Revolution started on November 20, 1910, and lasted around one decade, until 1920. To understand what led to this movement, you first need to understand what was happening at Mexico at the time. In 1976, a new president rose to power. His name was Porfirio Diaz. Porfirio Diaz proved to be a great president. He developed the railroad, he improved Mexico's economy, he took Mexico actually to a whole new level, and he brought peace to Mexico. People were actually happy the first time he was president, and well, everything sounds perfect on paper, doesn't it? But there's a dark side to the story too. Porfirio Diaz led the country with his slogan Orden y Progreso. This means order and progress. But I think he took his slogan a little bit too seriously because he was really strict with his rules and with his punishments. He was really cruel. When people didn't follow a rule when he had a vision. If someone was an obstacle to that vision, he just eliminated. He can even send them to prison all their life. He can even kill them. So he was kind of scary. He was a scary president. The thing is that this type of unfair government lasted around 30 years. Yes, Porfirio Diaz was a dictator. He re-elected himself 11 times. People were sick of him. They were sick of living in poverty. They were sick of having to fight for something to eat. I know I told you that he improved Mexico's economy, but just to a small part of the population, just a small part were the rich part, were the lucky ones, were the ones that were actually enjoying the improvement of Mexico as a whole, as a country. But the majority of the population, the majority of the Mexican people were suffering from extreme poverty. They were suffering from forced labor. They were suffering from having nothing to eat. So, as you may already imagine, people were sick of Porfirio Diaz. There were 30 years in power is a lot of time. As you may think by now, people were sick of Porfirio Diaz's dictatorship. They were sick of 30 years of horrible living. They were sick of social division and economic inequality between maybe both parts of the population, the rich ones and the extreme poor ones. So this is what will lead people to fight their president, to fight the government they were living in, to fight what they really wanted. So now going to the war itself, every war has that event that triggers the whole war, that triggers the whole movement, that actually sparks people interest and hope to something better. In this case, in the Mexican Revolution, it was an interview that Porfirio Diaz had with an English interviewer named James Krillman in 1908. In this interview, Porfirio Diaz revealed that he thought that Mexico was finally ready for democracy, that he was ready to leave power, he was ready to pass power to someone else to lead, blah, blah, blah. He was actually ready to give the power to someone else to keep improving Mexico as a country. So he said it was going to be last year's in power. He was ready for new fair elections and for someone new to become president of Mexico. So people were really happy. You may think people were hopeful, they were happy with news, they were excited and they were hopeful that someone else could take the power and they could give them equality and justice and take them out from their suffering. So there was this specific man called Francisco Ignacio Madero. Francisco Ignacio Madero postulated himself in the next elections against Porfirio Diaz. Everything turned out great. He was a really great man. Everyone loved him. He promised to bring power to the people. Officially, the Mexican Revolution had begun. There were several stages of the war. The first stage was named La Etapa Maderista, where Pancho Villa led the north and Emiliano Zapata led the south. And after all the bloody mess, Diaz finally surrendered. He gave the presidency and moved to Paris in 1911. To make it official, Los Tratados de Juárez were made on May 21st of 1911. Francisco Madero became president, and Pino Suárez was named vice president. But there was a slight problem. Remember Emiliano Zapata? He fought side by side with Madero in the war, but only with one condition. He wanted the lands returned to his people. The thing is that when Madero rise to power, he didn't exactly give the lands immediately to Emiliano Zapata. So he thought he was being lied by Madero, so he made this plan against Madero. This plan was named El Plan de Ayala. Madero, without knowing what to do, asked Victoriano Huerta for help. Victoriano Huerta gladly accepts. So, as you may already notice, this war is more complicated than more of the actual wars. They have a lot of treason, a lot of backstabbing, a lot of lies. So this man, Victoriano Huerta, he may appear as a saint because he helped Madero with the problem of El Plan de Ayala, but he's actually a really bad guy. Victoriano Huerta talks to Bernardo Reyes and to Felix Diaz, a general and a politician, to gather up against Madero. He wanted Madero killed so he can gain all the power, promising Bernardo and Felix a little bit of the power too. But Victoriano Huerta was really smart, so he gathered up together Bernardo, Felix, Madero, and Pino Suárez all together and created a horrible event called La Decena Trágica. La Decena Trágica, as their name says, lasted 10 days. It was on February 11 of 1913. This was a horrible thing where Huerta gathered them all to kill them all so he can gain all the power. Tragically, the plan worked, so Victoriano Huerta rise to power. But Victoriano Huerta was not even a good president. He gave all the attention and all the power to the elites that you can say are the rich people, the lucky ones, and he didn't concentrate at all on the poor ones or the majority of the population of Mexico. With all the power of Huerta, this is how some people gathered up together and the Constitucionalistas were born. This group of people were what we can call the rebels, who wanted Victoriano Huerta out of the power. This group of Constitucionalistas was confirmed by Emiliano Zapata, Pancho Villa, Álvaro Obregón, and Venustiano Carranza. All these four came together, they created a plan, and they got Victoriano Huerta out of Mexico. He actually exiled himself to Jamaica, so he can never be found again. So, after this, the Constitucionalistas were fighting with each other to see who was going to raise to the presidency, and Venustiano Carranza wins. So he became the next president of Mexico. Unfortunately, history tends to repeat itself. So the Constitucionalistas and the rest of the people unknown Carranza as a president because of a lot of reasons. So Mexico now is a chaotic mess. It develops into a chaotic anarchy, meaning that no one has the power and anyone can do whatever they want. So because of this, Villa starts to do whatever he wants in the north of the country, and Carranza, being really worried about what is going to happen to the country, even though he's not the president anymore, asks Álvaro Obregón for help. Álvaro Obregón helps him, but just as Huerta did, then he backstabs Carranza to gain all the power again. Obregón gives Zapata the agrarian reform he always wanted, but in 1919, Zapata is killed. Then they control Villa, so he stopped doing whatever he wants in the north. And after that is controlled, Carranza and Obregón can concentrate themselves to fight for who is going to stay in the power. So after all this mess and people fighting with each other and people doing whatever they want and fighting for what they truly believe in, we finally settled down. People were starting to stop fighting, to stop. He would. I think people were tired of really fighting all the time, and Mexico was a total chaos. So finally, Mexico settled down, and on February 5th of 1917, our constitution is born and is finally finished. This is a book with all the laws and all the rules we as a country, Mexico, are going to follow in order to gain peace again, in order to start building our country again to a more controlled and better place.
The main causes of World War I were nationalism, which is attachment to a land, Panslavism, which was a movement of the Slavs that wanted their independence from Austro-Hungary. The Industrial Revolution caused a lot of rivalries for better technology. New weapons were created, like the machine gun, mines, mortar, submarines, bombs. These required raw materials, so the countries wanted more colonies. The Industrial Revolution caused a lot of tension. Armed peace and militarism was from 1871 to 1914. During this period, there were no wars, but almost every country was producing weapons. Other nations started to feel threatened. Systems of alliances were made in case something happened. Propaganda was used to brainwash people. It became offensive toward other countries and it also created tension. The Serbians created secret societies called Black Hands. They talked about what they could do to create a country of their own. Eventually, they came up with an idea that would later on sparkle the First World War. This idea was known as the Sarajevo Incident. The plan was to assassinate the Archduke Francis Ferdinand. This happened on June 28, 1914. This happened in June 28, 1914. They not only killed the Archduke, but also his wife Sophie. 1 month later, Austria declared war to Serbia. The war became official when Great Britain declared war to Germany on August 4, 1914. There were two sides, the Triple Alliance, later called Central Powers, made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. They created the Schlieffen Plan against France, entered into Belgium, and then attacked Russia. And the Triple Entente, also known as Allies, composed by France, Great Britain, and Russia. France created the Plan 17 to get even with Germany. Both plans passed through Belgium, so when they met, a war of trenches took place. Both plans failed, so the war took longer than expected. Belgium was left destroyed. In April 26, 1915, Italy changed sides and joined the Allies. In 1916, Greece and Romania were added to the Allies. Since they were geographically close to Germany, they helped by blocking them. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers as a way to weaken Russia, and they prevent Russia from taking their territory. Then Bulgaria also joined. Germany created submarines since they knew Great Britain had the best navy and they wouldn't be able to defeat them by sea. They started sinking ships, and in May 7, 1915, they destroyed the Lusitania, that was a civilian ship and also had US citizens. US was neutral towards the war, so they only gave Germany a warning. On January of 1917, Germany sent the Zimmermann telegram to Venustiano Carranza, which was the president of Mexico, asking them to join with the Central Powers, and in return, they will get back the lands previously taken by US. But this telegram never arrived to Mexico because Great Britain intercepted it. They showed it to US and they talked with Mexico, asking them what they would do. Mexico said they wouldn't join since... otra vez. Mexico said they wouldn't join
since they had a lot of problems going on in Mexico. That's when US joined the Allies. Cuba, Panama, and Brazil also joined because of US economic pressure. In 1917, Russian Revolution began. It was until 1918 that Russia wanted to get out of the war, so they signed the Brest-Litovsk Treaty in March. It was a treaty stating that they could get out of the war if they gave Finland and Poland to Germany. Russia accepted the terms and get out of the war. US advance was strong and offensive until they defeated the Central Powers. US President Woodrow Wilson created the 14 points, mainly to state that there will be no more secret alliances. There should be self-determination of the people and the creation of the League of Nations. The war had many effects. It was the end of monarchies. The League of Nations was created with the purpose of maintaining world peace and solving international disputes. Austria-Hungary was separated. US became the leading world power with a very stable economy. There was an economic depression for Germany, and women had more rights thanks to the work they did when all the men left to the war. There was the Paris Peace Conference, the Treaty of Versailles, and the 14 points. New countries were created: Austria, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Finland. The Paris Peace Conference was an effect of World War I. It took place in Paris on January 18, 1919. In this conference, the victors of the war set the terms for the Central Powers. There were more than 32 participants, but the main ones were Great Britain, US, Italy, and France. They decided to create a League of Nations, and they made 5 treaties for the defeated countries, the most important being the Treaty of Versailles, made for Germany, which included that they should give away Alsace and Lorraine, pay about $300 million for reparation, no more alliances with Austria, and there would be no more Kaiser, and with it, the beginning of the Weimar Republic. They should not have an army nor produce more weapons, and they would be supervised by the Big Four. The Big Four were integrated by Great Britain, represented by the Prime Minister David Lloyd, US represented by President Woodrow Wilson, France represented by George Clemenceau, and Italy represented by Vittorio Orlando.
Revolution comes from evolve. People want to change government, ideas, treatment, economic conditions, and social positions, etc. The Russian Revolution was during the year of 1917, and some of the causes were injustice, corruption, and social inequality, where 74% of people were peasants, 13% were factory workers, and only 9% were political class. Before the revolution, Russia was the only true autocracy left in Europe, where there was no type of representative political institutions. Also, Nicholas II became Tsar in 1884, and believed that he was the absolute ruler and anointed by God. Russia's defeat in the Russo-Japanese War left them with serious political instability. The Russo-Japanese was a dispute between Manchuria and Japan that shook national confidence in the progress and rule of Tsar. One of the most important events in Russia was the Bloody Sunday during the year of 1905, where society stood out of the Winter Palace asking for fair treatment. Instead of negotiating, the Tsar asked the government to get rid of them, so they started killing them. To talk about the Russian Revolution, it's important to see the aftermath that the World War I for Russia, since people from Russia didn't like the war because they thought that it was an unnecessary way to spend their money, because the Tsar spent the money on weapons and military training instead of spending it on people's needs. Nicholas II left St. Petersburg to go to the war front to go with the soldiers and left the government control of her wife, Alexandra, who was the mother of 3 girls and only 1 boy named Alexei, who had a terrible disease called hemophilia that caused him to bleed really quickly.
Rasputin was a priest that had special powers, and Alexandra introduced Rasputin to the government because when he was around, he was able to cure Alexei. And society started to consider him a threat because he started to take control over Alexandra and the government. By this time, two opposing teams started to form, the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks. Mensheviks' leader was Kerensky, and its followers were mostly the elites and didn't want the Tsar and also wanted to eliminate the whole family, so there was no legacy left to run the throne. They wanted a democracy and didn't like Rasputin and made a plan to kill him. The Bolsheviks' leader was Lenin, and most of their followers were the proletariats. Later, the assembly decided to establish a provisional government led by Prince Lvov. Then the Mensheviks were in charge, and the working class, the Soviets, even though they were the majority of people, didn't have any power. Lenin was exiled for his radical ideas, but still fought outside of the country. He came up with the April thesis, which stated that the power should be in hands of the proletariat, that the capitalism had to end, and that the lands should be of the people. In July of 1917, the Tsar, along with his entire family, were killed by the Mensheviks. Since now there was no one to rule the country, the war for the power began between the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. The Bolshevik Revolution, that can also be considered a civil war, started in 1917 and made an internal division in the Bolsheviks, since many of the followers believed that power was going to be transitory and it never happened, so they felt used and went to the Menshevik side. The Mensheviks were also called White Army, and they received the help of France and Great Britain. The Bolsheviks were from the Red Army, and they won because they had a great leader, Trotsky, Lenin's best friend. The outcome of the Civil War was that Russia became communist. The new name was United Soviet Socialist Republic, and in the year of 1923, USSR was created. They transitioned from capitalist to communist, and they set all private economy in the hands of the state. Lenin established only one political party, and then died in 1924. In his testament, he said that Stalin should govern, so there was a fight for leadership between Trotsky and Stalin won his period, Stalinism. Trotsky runs to Mexico with Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, and they found him and killed him.
The 2-year-old Puyi inherited the throne. Two groups rise against the government: Sun Yat-sen and his followers, and Yuan Shikai and his followers. Sun Yat-sen had ideas of change. They were liberal, but they were unpopular and had little support. Yuan Shikai was in charge of the imperial army. He wanted things to be as they used to. He was traditional. He had more support than Sun Yat-sen. They decided to make a negotiation in which Yuan Shikai will be president if he follows Sun Yat-sen ideas. He accepted, but didn't respect the deal and stayed traditional. So he was considered a traitor. In this new republic, there was no unity. They had a poor transportation system, the roads were very undecent. This led to a civil war in 1911, reformers versus traditionalists. The reformers were led by Sun Yat-sen and wanted a democracy. The traditionalists were led by Yuan Shikai and wanted China to be the old-fashioned way. The reformers won, and Sun Yat-sen created a political party called Kuomintang, meaning National Party. Russia spread their communist ideas in exchange of leaving Manchuria, so communism started growing in China. There were people who were in favor of communism and people who were against. This led to another civil war in 1927. They were the nationalists led by Sun Yat-sen and the communists by Mao Zedong. The communists won in 1949, making China communist.
Before World War I, US had been exporting a lot to Europe. This created more jobs, and their economy rose to economic stability. After World War I, they were the least affected since no battle took place in their territory, and they didn't have to pay to repair any damages. This led to a period in the 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties, where they were in a very good economic position. The radio, motion pictures, electronic appliances such as toasters, freezers, and washing machines, and the automobile industry was very consumed. People started spending more money than they had and asking for loans. Since the banks didn't check if they really had the money to pay, they lent loans to everybody. Companies started to overproduce, and there was an economic crisis that not only affected US, but also other economies that were linked with them, like Europe, because US was supporting European countries to help them rebuild their nations after World War I by giving them loans with the Dawes Plan. But these only ended up being a negative investment for the United States, since Europe was unable to pay them back. This economic aid was also known as the Dawes Plan. As we already mentioned, US citizens also asked for loans, and since they weren't able to pay them either, they stopped buying stuff, and that created an economic crisis. Investors took out of their money from the stock market, and in October 29, 1929, there was a crash in the stock market. This day is also known as Black Tuesday. The rate of unemployment grew significantly. In 1929, it was at 3.2%, and it continued to go up until it reached the 17.2% in 1939. Also, the suicide rate increased. In 1932 was the worst year. The government didn't know how to deal with the crisis. It was until 1933 that Franklin Roosevelt was elected president, and he came up with an idea to help their economy to slowly recover. This idea was known as the New Deal. It consisted of economic reactivation via consumption and investment. There was now being bank control by checking people's economic status to avoid another crisis, and taxation was implemented. World War II, one of the darkest times in history, was the war between the Axis and Allied powers, which started in 1939 and finished in 1945. The Axis powers were formed by Germany, Japan, Italy, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, while the Allied powers were formed by Great Britain, France, United States, Soviet Union, or what we know now as Russia, Australia, Belgium, and many others. Before we can understand all the causes and conflicts of World War II, we need to go back a couple years and understand what is the policy of appeasement. After World War I, when Germany lost, they were given a very strict terms at the Treaty of Versailles. After Germany fulfilled these terms for about 10 years, they started to break some of them. And the Big Four realized that they might have exaggerated by giving Germany so many terms. So they felt bad and decided to create a policy of appeasement where they let Germany break the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. This policy of appeasement also included that the Munich Conference, where Sudetenland was given to Hitler by the Big Four, with that condition that he would stay put and do not attack any country. But of course, Hitler didn't keep his end of the bargain. World War II sparkled with Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland. Right after this, Great Britain declared war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. Then, on September 17, 1939, Soviet Union defended Poland. Later, in 1941, Hitler, with the Operation Barbarossa, invades the Soviet Union, breaking the Nazi-Soviet pact. Given that Germany already broke the Nazi-Soviet pact, Soviet Union declares war on Germany. But due to the cold weather of October, Germany got paralyzed and couldn't advance any further with their attack. The Nazi-Soviet pact was a previous agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union, where they stated that they wouldn't attack each other if a war rose. And they would split Poland in two, so the Soviet Union would take the east side and Germany would take the west. So the fact that Germany invaded the Soviet Union was taken as an offense to them because Germany broke the pact that they established in the first place. So that meant that Germany had a secret plan to do something bigger than anybody would imagine. And invading the Soviet Union was just a piece of such a huge puzzle. Another big piece of this puzzle was the Holocaust, which was when Hitler decided that the Aryan race was superior than any other race, and they should be the only ones to live in Germany. So they could create a perfect race. Of course, to achieve this goal, Hitler had to get rid of all the other races from Germany that were not Aryan. And since practically the only other race in Germany besides Aryan was the Jews, they ended up being the most affected. The word Holocaust is defined as any mass slaughter or reckless destruction of life, which is exactly what happened in this time. And that is why human rights were extremely violated during this war, but more specifically during the Holocaust. Another way in which human rights were violated was with all the attacks from Japan. Japan was so focused on conquering land in China and demonstrating that they were powerful that they didn't care about their brutal massacres or what they destroyed along the way. Japan's attacks were so bad that the United States threatened them with an oil embargo. And since Japan didn't listen, the United States stopped supplying them with raw materials. Japan responded to this oil embargo with Pearl Harbor, an attack on the United States that happened on December 7, 1941, and the main reason why the United States joined the war. Even after this, Japan still didn't listen and continued attacking, so they were taken out of the League of Nations. But Japan was so stubborn that that didn't stop them either. It was until September 2nd, 1945, that Japan finally surrendered after being bombed by the United States in Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th, 1945. Japan's surrender was considered the official end of World War II throughout the world. But there were other events, like the conferences of Soviet Union, United States, and Great Britain, that also led to the end of this war. The first conference was the Tehran Conference, which was held from November 28 to December 1st, 1943. In this conference, Stalin from Soviet Union, Roosevelt from United States, and Churchill from Great Britain got together to plan how to defeat Germany and to liberate Italy, Eastern Europe, France, and North America. The second conference was the Yalta Conference, from February 4th to 11th, 1945. In this conference, the same people from the last conference participated, and they arranged Europe's post-war organization. The third conference was a Potsdam Conference from July 17 to August 2nd, 1945, with the same participants. And in this conference, they gave Japan its ultimatum, and this was the last conference held by the Allies.
Soy Friederike Gerda Flughagen, nací en Alemania en 1944, en noviembre del 44, y me tocó los últimos meses de la guerra. En mi casa no se hablaba mucho de la guerra porque pues, eran recuerdos que no agradaban mucho a mis padres, pero por eso no sé mucho y no me he metido mucho en saber de la guerra. Lo que sé es las cosas que nos sucedieron como familia allá, después de que yo nací. La vida era muy difícil para las señoras porque pues, sabían cuando tenían casa, ahorita no sabían si dentro de 10 minutos iban a seguir teniendo casa. A mis papás les tocó de salir a dejar unas cosas para que por correo se enviaran a un sitio más seguro. Vivían en Berlín y cuando regresaron ya no tenían casa, la habían bombardeado, había desaparecido. Entonces eran cosas difíciles de vivir en aquella época. También sucedió que cuando yo nací en una ciudad, no donde vivían mis papás, que era Berlín, sino que mi papá, por un problema físico de una pierna rota por un accidente, estaba en otra ciudad, Breslau, que ahora ya no es parte de Alemania, es parte de Polonia. Y ahí fue donde yo nací, porque mi mamá fue a ver a mi papá, que él estaba en el ejército. Y ella estaba pues en un hospital. Y esto fue en finales del 44. Y en principios del 45 los rusos llegaban hacia esa ciudad, ya iban a tomar esa ciudad y ya no había forma de defenderla. Los alemanes ya iban a dejar la ciudad para que los rusos entraran. Entonces existía un tren, había un tren en la ciudad, un tren militar, donde los militares iban a salir y la población la dejaban abandonada a lo que les pasara cuando entraran los rusos. Entonces mi papá pues iba a salir en ese tren porque él era militar, pero mi mamá y yo teóricamente no. Entonces pues mi papá, como era médico militar, él era médico, entonces se las ingenió para conseguir un uniforme de enfermera para mi mamá y la disfrazó de enfermera. ¿Y el bebé qué hacemos con él? Entonces pues como buen médico tenía soluciones, me puso una inyección para quedarme bien dormidita. Me metió en el maletín de médico que mi mamá lo traía como si fuera oro en polvo y entré en el tren militar siendo un maletín de médico. Nadie sabía que ahí iba un bebé. Y así fue como salimos de esa ciudad, que muchas de las personas de esas que vivían en esa ciudad no sobrevivieron al final de la guerra. Entonces, de esa forma, aquí estoy todavía, vivita. Si no, quién sabe si estuviera. Ya después ya nos bajaron del tren. Bueno, a mi mamá la bajaron en algún sitio del tren y de ahí ya, en un sitio donde no estaban los rusos cerca, y ya de ahí ella se fue por sus medios a donde ya pudo vivir el resto de la guerra. Esas son las cosas así que me acuerdo me contaron del tiempo de la guerra, porque de esa época no me acuerdo de nada.
The term Cold War refers to a state of tension. This war was something that didn't involve any shootings or massacres. Disagreements between the USSR's communism and the United States capitalism started between 1947 and 1951, shortly after World War II. Since Germany was divided into 4 parts between the USSR, the United States, France, and Great Britain, they all owned a part of Berlin, but the USSR wanted all of Berlin, so that's how the Berlin Blockade started. George Kennan, an American advisor, wrote a telegram and said that the USSR was inflexible since they were very restrictive with their government. The USSR answered and said that the US was using its monopoly. That's where the tension started, and Winston Churchill started to notice it. The division between communism and capitalism started with political military organizations, economic alliances. None of the 2 blocs took actions against each other, and both countries were looking for hegemony, which means only one in power. The United States made the Marshall Plan in 1947, which was an American initiative to aid Europe and Asia after World War II. Then they made the Truman Doctrine of the same year, where President Truman established that the US would provide political and military assistance to people as long as they stay capitalist. And also, they created NATO, which was a North Atlantic Treaty Organization that consisted of international and military organizations created with the objective of organizing Europe. Since the United States decided to create NATO, the USSR decided to strike back, and they created Comecon. It was an organization for economic cooperation created by the USSR, which looked forward for the motivation for economical relationship between members as a response to the Marshall Plan. At the end, the Eisenhower Doctrine, which Middle Eastern countries could request American economic assistance or aid from the US military forces if it was being threatened by armed aggression from another state. happened, and the Warsaw Pact, which was a treaty for military cooperation which objective was being responsible to the threat of NATO creation of food. During the Cold War, a lot of proxy wars, which were armed confrontations that occurred when superpowers used other countries as substitutes instead of confronting them, happened, such as the Korean War, the Cuban Revolution, the Vietnam War, Guatemala Civil War, Afghan-Soviet War, Cuban Missile Crisis, Bay of Pigs, among others. These confrontations led to a lot of conflict between important countries and a lot of damages leading to economic depressions and crises. At the end, the United States and the USSR decided to make the Bandung Conference in 1955, which was a settle down, and in 1962, the Belgrade Conference happened in order to define principles. They preserved independence, and also countries like Yugoslavia and India formed the NAM, the non-aligned countries. That was the non-aligned movement, which were countries that decided to not inflict in the conflict against the USSR and the USA and started to stay neutral. At the end of this war, the NAM started to lose its impact.
Some of the most important proxy wars were Bay of Pigs in 1961. This was an unsuccessful invasion of US in 1961 to the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. The motive for the attack was that Cuba had lost US influence after the revolution. US wanted to impose a democratic leader so they could use Cubans that escaped to make them attack in case Cuba caught them. They wouldn't suspect that the attack was planned by US. But when Fidel Castro won, they knew US were the ones in charge. This only worsened the relationship between US and Cuba. This war would later cause another US-Cuban problem, the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was in 1962, and it was because Cuba allied with the USSR. When the USSR found out that US had some missiles pointing at them in Turkey, they asked Cuba if they couldn't put missiles in their country pointing at the US. Cuba accepts. They put up artillery missiles. Later on, in an illegal fight from the US, they discovered the missiles in Cuba. They keep it top secret while they can figure out what to do. This was kept secret for 13 days. During this time, they discussed their options. They could go to the UN, but then the flight was so illegal, so they will have the blame. Finally, they decided they will negotiate with the USSR, and they both removed their missiles. This caused a US-Cuba embargo, which is that there can be US products in Cuba and vice versa. The embargo is still present today.